how's the grid like for IPL?
You and I know that it's the biggest tournament in India.
Right.
It's the biggest cricket tournament in the world.
Bumrah maybe get most of the injuries. Can you give us like a little depth on why Bumrah is more at risk? That's why, the coach and the selectors are saving him for the best matches.
He's a very, very special talent. And because he's a special talent, he is expected to play all three formats. And so immediately, if a player is playing all three formats of the game, then risk goes up.
Let's talk a little about the athletes. Which maybe 3 or 4 cricketers that are the most disciplined, like you admire their discipline. Can you give us some names?
Every cricketer now that comes into this level and stays at this level has to be disciplined.
Right.
And they have to be disciplined not just about their batting and bowling. They have to be disciplined around their nutrition. They have to be disciplined around their recovery, their sleep.
From a cricketer as well as a physiotherapist perspective, what are you expecting in the IPL 2026?
It's always full of surprises, trust me. And that's the beauty of the game, and it's the beauty of the format, and it's the beauty of the IPL. From day one, the tournament, you never really know what's going to happen.
Hello there everyone, welcome to Bat, Ball or Bath. This is the show where we bring to you untold stories, unique conversations from the world of cricket. Sach kahu to, the stories that often happen behind the scenes. So for this today's one-on-one over, we have with us John Gloster. He is the head of medical at Rajasthan Royals, director of sports science at Go Sports Foundation, as well as the former head physiotherapist of the Indian cricket team. So hello and welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So actually my first main question is you've worked in this unique cricket environment. How did your journey begin in this field?
It's been a long one, I can tell you right now. The cricket journey for me with international cricket's around 28 years. So my first sort of introduction to elite level cricket was in England in the late 90s, 97, 98. I was at Surrey County Cricket. And that sort of got me into I played cricket myself prior to that, and I was actually quite a good cricketer. But then the international cricket journey started in England with Surrey, and a very successful side. And on the back of that, I was then asked to go and head up the medical side at Bangladesh. So when Bangladesh first got their test status in the early 2000s, they asked me to go over there. And so I spent 4 years with the test team in Bangladesh, living in Dhaka for 4 years, which was very interesting. Culturally, for me, it was difficult because I'd come from Australia to England and then from England straight to Bangladesh. But it also was very good for me because from Bangladesh, I then went straight to India. Mr. Dalmia, who was the BCCI president at the time, was the one who invited me over to spend 4 years with the Indian cricket team after that. But the transition from Bangladesh to India was much easier, having had that Bangladesh experience. So, so I came to the Indian cricket team 2004, 2005, and then had a wonderful time with them. And then along came the IPL in 2008, and I've been with Rajasthan Royals since its inception. So this is season 19 we're going into now with IPL, and fortunately for us, we won that tournament in 2008.
Since even IPL is approaching, how's the how's the Jazba grit? Jazba how's the grit like for IPL?
Look, you and I know that it's the biggest tournament in India. It's the biggest cricket tournament in the world, and IPL as a product is now the most valuable sporting league in the world. So everybody gets excited by it. It's a tournament that has proven for 18 seasons already to be extremely valuable, not just from the cricket perspective, but also for the sports ecosystem in this country. And other sports are now sort of taking on some of the mantras that the IPL's brought into sport and embracing those. So we're all very excited. It's another season. There's a lot of new faces in the teams, having had an auction at the end of last year. So particularly Rajasthan Royals, there's some nice young faces coming through that we're excited to work with, and some older faces as well coming back. We're all very excited about that tournament kicking off soon.
Okay, now you're the best person to tell us, there's T20, there's Test, there's ODI. From a physiotherapist perspective, what would you say how things arrive for ODI, Test and T20?
they're all cricket, but they're all very different formats of cricket.
Exactly.
And, we are fortunate now to have data and technology, which tells us more specifically about the types of formats and the demands of each one.
Right.
And it's very interesting that the biggest difference between the three formats in terms of not just the fact that Test cricket's 5 days, but one of the things that we look at very closely is the intensity of activity during those 5 days, or that 1 day, or that 3 hours of a T20. And we know that the high-speed running efforts, because of our GPS technologies that we use with our players, it's 30% higher in T20 cricket than it is in ODI or Test cricket. So preparing an athlete for T20 is very different than how we prepare them for Test cricket. So if you have players who are coming from a Test series straight into an IPL tournament, which is T20, we need to be very, very careful with them, because their risk of injury is very high because of the intensity of the efforts that's involved in T20 cricket. And also a format like IPL, where there's a lot of travel, there's a lot of time when we're on the road, we're playing, we're training, so very little recovery time. So we need to be very careful of that as well. And it's a long tournament. All up, it's over 8 weeks. It's a 10-week journey for most, given the 2 weeks at the start of the tournament. So all that needs to be factored in. But yeah, very different formats. I love all three. I've always been a big fan of Test cricket. I've always been a big fan of first-class cricket, particularly here in India. And the caliber of cricketers that are now coming out of that system, you'll not only see going into the Indian team, Test team, but we're now also seeing guys with enormous first-class and Test cricket skills transferring those skills into the shorter formats with great success as well.
Okay. Since you spoke about first class cricket, I had recently gone to Hubli for the finals, and there was a Jammu and Kashmir cricketer who told me that, just a day before the match, he just bent down and some slip disc problem happened. Have you ever come across an injury where something like this just suddenly happens for a match that is, for that cricketer, it's like, oh, I want to play the finals. And for Jammu and Kashmir, it was the first time they reached finals. Have you ever come across a sudden injury that actually even has stunned you?
Yeah, that's not an uncommon story, sadly. But and look, that's my job. My job is to make a decision on that player as to whether it is safe or not for them to continue to play that game or participate in that game. And sometimes there's a lot of disappointment around those decisions. But at the end of the day, it's about what's in the best interest of that player, their short-term health and their long-term health, and that's primarily my role. As you said, the Jammu J&K story this year was a fantastic story.
Exactly.
And some great stories of resilience that have come out of that journey this year for those Ranji boys. One of our players who's at Rajasthan Royals is also in that side, so enormous congratulations to them. But you're right, there are occasions when there's big tournaments, big finals, World Cup finals, where stuff happens and players do get injured, and unfortunately it often leaves them out of the side. But I will never leave somebody at risk of further injury or further damage to their body. If that is the case, then we have to take the tough decisions sometimes. And but that player, if he didn't play that final, knows that they've played a significant role in getting the team to the final.
True.
And their support on that day is still just as important as their journey leading into that tournament as well.
Right. But, since you have played cricket, I have been a former badminton player. We athletes have that, even if we are injured, we have that thing as, no, I want to play. I want to be on the crease. I have to go. What do you do in that case? Like as an ex-former cricketer as well as a current physiotherapist, how does your mindset revolve? Okay, he wants to play, but I can't risk him going on the field. So how do you deal in that situations?
Yeah, and it helps having played the game. It helps having played that sport, so you understand the emotion around it as well. But I can't bring emotion into my decision making, and that's the most important thing. I have to go on science. I have to go on my clinical reasoning. I have to, as I said, put the player's health and well-being as a priority.
Right.
And I've had to have some very difficult conversations with players before large tournaments, large events, large finals. But they know that the decision I'm making is in their best interests, and you know that you're not going to please everybody, but at the end of the day, my number one job is to look after the best interests of that player and their health and well-being.
Right. Okay, since you've worked closely with the Indian cricket team as well, is there any moment that you would like to share with the audience that they'd want to know ki, cricket is not just the spotlight or the sixes, but there's much more happening, like no one better than you can tell us. Do you want to share any moments as such?
Yeah, look, those sixes are a result of, as an audience, you see the end result, which is, perhaps a Vaibhav Suryavanshi scoring 100 off 35 balls and, against the best bowling attack in the IPL. But you don't see how they got to that point and the journey that they've, that's taken them there.
True.
Praveen Tambe, who's a classic example of that, is that, people think that he suddenly came onto into the IPL and was a very successful player for a couple of seasons, won a player of the tournament in the Champions Trophy. But people don't see that for 30 years, and he made his debut at close to 40. People don't see that for 30 years he'd been toiling away, working hard, never giving up, being disciplined around everything in order to get that one chance. So we see that side. We see the efforts, the energies, and sometimes when players do fail, which happens, I mean, even the greatest players on the planet fail more than half of the times they go out onto the field, and the numbers tell you that, Sir Donald Bradman only ever succeeded in 50% of the time that he went out to bat. Steve Smith, only 30 to 40% of the time did they actually succeed. So failure is a big part of that journey, and we see those failures as well. But the successes come on the back of their learnings from those failures, and we're part of that journey. We're part of the lead up, the build up, the training, all of the injuries, all the things that go into them. Finally being able to put it all together, and you see the end result, thankfully, on the television. But there are a lot of stories to be told around the other side.
Exactly.
And it's great of you to unpack some of those stories in these types of podcasts, because it's important that the audience understands what those journeys look like and how tough they are for some people. There's no easy story out there. For successful athletes at this level, there's no easy story leading into that. Into that performance that you see ultimately on the television or at the ground.
But you have seen that, BTS, what actually happens if you had to tell the audience, maybe because the audience is just viewing the spotlight. Okay, he's hitting sixes. As you said, he's hitting sixes. He's scoring runs. They're winning. But that's all that is visible to them because you've seen what happens there. Is there any message that you would want to give the audience that, okay, I would like to tell her that this is also what happens, and that's the understanding you all should have during certain matches, because you know how audience acts when we lose. So is there a message that you'd like to give?
Nobody wants to lose and nobody wants to fail, particularly when you're in front of 100,000 people at the Ahmedabad Stadium. But what people don't see often is, in order to hit that six out of the ground, the type of training that goes into being able to deliver on that. The strength training they do, the power-based training they do, for many of them, Pilates, all these different types of trainings that go into being more stable, being more controlled. So it's the hours and hours and hours that they put in the gym, on the training field, understanding where their strengths are, where their weaknesses are, maintaining strengths, building weaknesses. So all these things go into it. And that's only the physical side. Then we need to also look at, there's another side, which is the mental side. And you being an athlete yourself, appreciate that sometimes you can do all the physical preparation work, but ultimately for many, it's actually the mental side of their game that lets them down.
True.
So now being really focused and aware that is a huge part of preparation as well. So understanding every athlete has had a different journey to get to where they are. And often that needs to be factored into their mental performance strategies that we use for them also. So stitching that player together, so to speak, so stitching the mental, or how I describe it, is from the shoulders up, appreciating that as being extremely valuable, and then putting that together with the physical preparation. And then the third piece really is their game sense, their game awareness, their tactical side, which the coaching staff help them with. So the complete athlete is made up of 3 or 4 key components that need to be trained separately.
Right.
And then when it all comes together properly, that's when you see those sixes being hit out of the ground, or that Yorker delivering a wicket or something in the death overs.
That's the since you mentioned Pilates as well, so many cricketers are opting for Pilates. Can you tell us that how Pilates actually benefits an athlete, whether it is core strength or injury prevention?
Both. Look, I think if you look at the modern game, particularly if you're talking about T20, it's a game built on speed and it's a game built on power. But both speed and power have to come from a very strong and stable core. And without that, you can't deliver. You can be the strongest athlete at lifting weights, but in order for that to become functional strength and to deliver in an outcome,
Right.
that outcome being bowling, batting, etc., then it needs to be from a strong foundation. So the beauty about Pilates and the way we use it is, first of all, to improve performance and to make them better at what they do by building out their core, building out their foundation, making them more stable, making them more mobile, more flexible, but also as an injury prevention mechanism. So you'll see a lot of the fast bowlers now, particularly ones who've had a history of back injuries or hip injuries, will do a lot of work, particularly reformer-based Pilates, because it's a beautiful way of stressing an athlete's musculoskeletal system without stressing it, if that makes sense. But at the sort of the core of it, so to speak, is this ability to build out their foundations to make them more durable, more resilient, and therefore better able to deliver on their skills and better able to reduce injury risks.
Okay. So like now as an audience, when I'm watching, I really want to know like which are the common injuries that like cricketers face, because like as an audience, I really want to know that is it a slip disc or like maybe like what kind of injuries they face, a strain, a sprain?
Yeah, look, I think you look at the game now is very, very different to what it was. And as I said before, the T20 game, particularly in a format like IPL, the types of injuries are quite different because the speed of the game has gone up so much. So speed has now to be factored in. So again, getting a lot more high velocity type injuries occurring. You'll also see the commitment to the ball in the field is much greater now. So you'll see guys attempting dives, attempting catches that perhaps you wouldn't have seen previously. So what that means is that you're getting injuries more so now, like dislocations, contusion injuries, impact type injuries, fractures that we often haven't seen before, that would be more associated with perhaps the contact sports, like Australian rules football or rugby or sports like that, because of the speed of the game and also the intensity at which they're playing and the commitment they're putting their bodies to the ball on the field. So we're looking at different injuries there now, but the most common injuries that we do see, particularly for our fast bowlers, is low back injuries still. We're still sort of trying to develop ways to protect fast bowlers' low backs from stress injuries. So load monitoring, looking at their gym-based training, and being better at understanding the individual sort of physiques and what their training tolerances are. Shoulders are always going to be an issue because it's a throwing-based sport, and it's a bowl. And if they're bowlers, then obviously shoulders. So bringing into play a lot more protection strategies for these athletes around their shoulders, their low backs, and then again for the fast bowlers, unfortunately, their hips and knees and ankles take a lot of stresses because of the forces. When their front leg hits the crease, 8 times their body weight is going up through their lower limbs, their ankles, and into their back. So we're getting better at protecting our athletes. We've got better strategies around it now, but it's still a work in progress because the game is progressing so fast as well. And as the game progresses, we see different types of injuries. And as you said earlier, that there's 3 formats of the game as well. And your best players are often playing all 3 formats.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're all very different. And preparation for each is very different. So if they're not prepared adequately for each one of those formats, then obviously injuries can occur.
You're right.
And you know that the calendars are pretty packed as well. So
yeah.
finding space between those formats to prepare them adequately from Test cricket to T20 cricket to ODI cricket, we're getting shorter and shorter periods to prepare them adequately. So therefore injury risk does go up.
True that. But if you had to like tell us that who is more prone to injury, obviously all the athletes are prone to injuries, but if you had to say like a bowler is more at risk or a batter is more at risk or a wicket keeper or a fielder, how would you rate that?
Well, the numbers tell you that fast bowlers are the ones who spend most of their time on the physio couch,
Right.
but yeah, it's predominantly the fast bowlers because of the impact and the intensities that they're subjected to, and so low back, ankle, and shoulder, injuries particularly. So they're the cohort that we sort of have to pay extra special attention to, and trying to monitor them throughout the year now in order to give them the best insights, protection, and information around how to look after themselves for the rest of the year, so that when they come to the IPL, they're ready and roaring to go for us.
So, like again, like from an audience POV, I have seen Bumrah maybe get most of the injuries. Is there anything you want to add on that? Why, in his case, obviously he's a bowler, it is prone, but can you give us like a little depth on why Bumrah is more at risk? That's why, the coach and the selectors are saving him for the best matches.
Yes, see, he's a very, very special talent. And because he's a special talent, he is expected to play all three formats. And so immediately, if a player is playing all three formats of the game, then risk goes up. You've also got to look at where they've come from and what their journey was leading into that, and how they were prepared as a young child, how they trained as a young child. You look at their nutrition as when they were kids. You look at what we call their training age or training history. Have they spent much time in a training environment or a gymnasium or a strengthening environment before they were exposed at the higher levels? So all these things get factored into our conversations with the athlete around why they're getting injured. But, I've never directly worked with Jasprit, but I know that the demands on him are extremely high because of the performances he can deliver across all three formats: red ball, white ball, and so we need to protect those assets, and sometimes it means that we will take them out of certain tournaments in order to have them prepped and ready for perhaps a more important tournament or a tournament that has greater impact for the country. And they're tough calls sometimes to make, but at the end of the day, like I said, it's in the best interest of the athlete and keeping him safe and secure and injury free for as long as we can. And Jasprit, I think, is a national asset, as we all know. And when you're looking after an asset like that, you do have to make certain decisions on their behalf around when do we expose them, how do we expose them, and in what tournaments do we expose them, and then get the athlete to buy into those decisions as well. Okay,
since we spoke about not just with, let's talk a little about the athletes. Which maybe 3 or 4 cricketers that are the most disciplined, like you admire their discipline? Can you give us some names?
Every cricketer now that comes into this level and stays at this level has to be disciplined. And they have to be disciplined not just about their batting and bowling. They have to be disciplined around their nutrition. They have to be disciplined around their recovery, their sleep, the way they behave around the group, their commitment to everything that we ask of them. So discipline is fully encompassing now, and it's not something you can sort of pick and choose to be, because you are going to get found out. There's nowhere to hide now. And when you got your peers are so successful and so good, then you've got to consistently stick to those routines, those disciplined roles. And so if you look across, a team like Rajasthan Royals or the Indian cricket team, every single one of them is embracing that, because if you don't, you won't be there very, very long. There's an old saying, talent gets you into the dressing room, but it's your discipline and how you behave once you're in there will determine how long you stay in that dressing room. So, guys like, there's one of the great, Ravindra Jadeja is a very good example, and it's so amazing to have him back with us at Rajasthan this year. He was with us in first year, when we won the tournament. And I'm the only person at Rajasthan who was there in year one. And now having him come back, it's amazing that, you know, this is so 18 years later, this boy who was a boy back then, he was 18 years old, is now, is first of all still playing at the highest level across all formats and delivering. And I've just spent the last 4 days working with him, and yes, the discipline that he has around every single one of those aspects that I talked about, the training, the recovery, the nutrition, so he's a very good example of somebody, in order to stay at that level of the game, you have to be committed to certain things. Otherwise, you won't stay there. The game's moving too fast for you not to do it.
Right. Since you spoke about Rajasthan Royals, you have been working with quite a lot of youngsters. So is there any mistake, like few mistakes that you feel like, these youngsters make that lead to the injury, maybe something like that?
No, I think often it's not their fault, to be honest, because they haven't had the training as a youngster, or they may not have had the nutritional inputs as a youngster that makes them more robust. And part of our role, therefore, is to educate them around what is appropriate, what is the best way to eat, what is the best way to recover, what are the best ways to train to stay injury-free. So the ones that don't tend to do that well are the ones that aren't open to the education side and aren't open to constructive advice. And but most of them realize that in order for them to stay at the top of their game for the longest period of time, they have to embrace new ideas. They have to be willing to change. I can't change what's already happened for them, but I can impact and change what they're doing right now and what they're going to be doing moving forward if they're with us. So so my role then is very much an education role, and very much a role where it is my responsibility to ensure that I improve their performances now, I keep them injury-free, but I've always got one eye on the future. And, I need to be asking the question all the time, with the strategy that I'm implementing now for that player, and it could be nutrition, could be training, could be recovery, whatever it is, how is that going to impact them in 15, 20 years' time? I can be giving nutritional advice now that is going to give them a performance improvement now, but may be detrimental to their long-term health as well. So I need to always have one eye on the future for that athlete, because I am responsible for their health and well-being outside of the cricketing arena as well.
Okay. Now, can you tell us, like, from a former cricketer as well as a physiotherapist perspective, what are you expecting in the IPL 2026?
It's always full of surprises, trust me. And that's the beauty of the game, and it's the beauty of the format, and it's the beauty of the IPL as a whole, is that from day one of the tournament, you never really know what's going to happen.
True.
And that's why we love that tournament. It's full of surprises. That's what keeps people engaged with the tournament. What keeps look, there's always clear favourites on paper, but that doesn't always turn out to be the reasons why you become successful. It's not always about the players you have in the dressing room. It's more around the environment and culture that brings those players together. So you can have a team of superstars individually, but it's not individuals that win these games. And so we're very focused on developing good cultures, creating very good constructive environments for those players to function within, because it's culture that can kill your tournament.
Right.
And it's cultures that allow a player of limited skill to elevate their skill. And it's culture that allows collectively that group of players to come together to function as a more efficient unit. So for us, culture, and we have a fantastic guy called Aaron Walsh, who's our head of mental performance at Rajasthan Royals, who's our culture and environment expert as well, who's been brilliant at creating these types of environments where we give every athlete within that dressing room the best opportunity to be successful individually, but also collectively.
Okay. And often I've heard cricketers say, and even sometimes even from audience, like my friends and all, I hear cricket is unpredictable, whether it is Test, T20, ODI, especially like during a long format like Test, you don't know what can happen. The game is moving slow, but like in just a minute, you don't know, 3-4 wickets might fall off. Anything you would want to say again, like how unpredictable is cricket according to you? Like,
Isn't that why we watch the game? We just never quite know what's around the corner, and that's what binds us to this sport is that unpredictability about it. And that's what keeps people engaged. That's what keeps us excited. My job and our job at the coaching staff level is to ensure that we try to make it more predictable in terms of positive outcomes.
true.
By having better prepared players, having more players available for selection who aren't injured, by having better strategies. So that's primarily what we're trying to do, is become more predictable in terms of our outcomes, and what are the processes that allow us to do that better than others. And as I said, part of that starts in the dressing room and the culture you provide, but you don't know what the other team's doing, and you don't know what they're doing, inside their dressing room. You don't know their strategies. So yeah, we can only do what we can do, and we can only control what we can control. And we do have a great analytics team, which allows us to try and get ahead on the analytics side of the game.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's about those individuals putting into practice their best practices on the field at that time, and bringing that to the fore more consistently.
Okay. Last question that I want to ask you is, you've seen cricket evolve over the years. Is there something that excites you and you're looking forward in the future, that I want to see cricket evolve more, but in a more different way?
I think technology is one of the most exciting things that's come into cricket. We use a lot of technology, from GPS tracking to wearables technologies, and I've always said the more insight that I have on a player or an athlete, the better I can then help you. So I think that's really exciting going forward, is the way we're using technology in cricket. We use it very effectively in other sports, from Premier League football to Australian rules football, World Rugby, etc., Formula One. So what excites me is we're starting to now look at other sports to get better at our own sport and to get better outcomes for our athletes, make them more resilient, make them less injury risk, ultimately improve performances and improve their sporting longevity. That's my job. So for me, that's a really exciting side, is embracing technology more. And one of the sort of things that I'm really passionate about, particularly at Rajasthan, is really sort of embracing and trying to bring more consistent high performance practices to cricket. Because I still don't think we do that very well in general in cricket. And so I think if we can sort of redefine this term high performance and how it relates to cricket, and I think technology is a big part of that conversation. And then on the back of those, embracing those high performance practices, ultimately get better cricketers coming out of it who are less injury risk, but also taking the whole sport forward as a whole. And that's sort of what I'm aiming to do and would like to continue to do. And then, given that cricket is such a powerful vehicle for change, because particularly in the subcontinent where the audience is so engaged in the game and is so knowledgeable about the game, how do we then use cricket to also amplify some other key agendas that we want to? And, things around health and wellness and fitness. I think we need to use the cricket vehicle, and particularly a vehicle like IPL, which has such a big audience, to use that more effectively to educate the greater population around those key topics and key agendas.
Okay, I think it was so like educated. I'm feeling educated, and I think I'm so happy that you were a part of this episode of Bat Ball or Bath. It was fascinating to hear so much. Like, it's like you genuinely said, so that it's not just the spotlight, there's much more. And we've seen the BTS, we've heard the BTS from you, what happens in cricket. I just want to say thank you so much for joining us for this episode and educating me as well as the audience with regards to this.
It's been a pleasure, and thank you for amplifying some of these really key concepts, key understandings, key learnings that I think everybody should be aware of. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. Viewers, listeners, for tuning in to another episode of Bat Ball or Parthe. Until then, keep enjoying the game, keep the conversations going, and obviously keep catching up with Kiara.